I've worked construction for nearly 15 years. I've seen some weird stuff. Buried tools, old bottles, even bones a few times. Mostly animal, once human. But nothing ever got to me like what we found in the excavation pit last year. We were working a new office complex project outside the city. The job was straightforward. Clear out the lot, dig the foundation, lay concrete. The area used to be an old warehouse district. Most of the buildings had already been torn down. But as we started digging, we hit something solid. At first, we thought it was a concrete slab left over from the warehouse. That happens a lot. But when we cleared away the dirt, we realized it wasn't just a slab, it was a metal door. It was thick, rusted, and bolted down into the ground like a vault hatch. No markings, no labels, just this heavy iron door sealed shut with no handle on our side. It didn't make sense. Why the hell would there be a locked door beneath a warehouse floor? We told the site manager, a guy named Ron. He took one look at it and said, "Cover it up, pour the foundation over it." That didn't sit right with me. We were supposed to dig this area out completely, down to the bedrock, but Ron was acting like he already knew what it was. I asked him about it later when the other guys weren't around. "What's under there?" He just sighed. "It's nothing. Just an old access tunnel from when this was industrial land. It's been sealed for decades. Forget it." But something felt off. That night, I went back to the site alone. I needed to see it again before they buried it forever. The site was dead silent except for the wind and the occasional creak of steel from the scaffolding. I climbed down into the pit with my flashlight, brushing away loose dirt from the door. I ran my hand along the metal, feeling the cold rust under my fingers. It was solid, completely shut. Then I noticed something. The dirt around the edges of the door looked disturbed, like someone had been digging from the other side. I knelt down and listened. Nothing, just silence. I told myself it was just settling ground or my imagination. I was about to stand up when I felt it. A vibration. Faint, almost nothing, but definitely real. Like something was moving underneath. Then came the sound. A single, slow knock. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Another knock. Louder. I scrambled back, nearly dropping my flashlight. My mind was racing. Was it an animal? A pipe shifting? I didn't know. I didn't want to know. Then, right as I turned to climb out, bang, bang, bang. 3 hard, deliberate knocks. I ran. The next morning, I told my crew. Nobody believed me. They laughed it off, said I was just scaring myself. But Ron pulled me aside. He wasn't laughing. "You went back last night, didn't you?" His face was pale. I nodded. "Ron, there's something down there. Someone. We need to open it." Ron shook his head. "We're not opening that door. We're pouring the foundation today. End of discussion." That pissed me off. If there's someone trapped, there's no one trapped. He said it so quickly, so forcefully, that I stopped. His hands were shaking. "I don't expect you to understand. Just let it go." I should have pushed harder. I should have refused to work, but I didn't. A few hours later, we poured the concrete, covering the door forever. 2 weeks passed. I tried to forget. I really did. But then the incident happened. A few workers were on site after hours setting up the next phase of the build. Around midnight, one of them, Jesse, was working near the foundation when he heard something. A knock. He ignored it at first, but then it got louder, more frantic, like someone pounding on metal. Jesse swears that when he put his ear to the ground, he heard screaming. After that, Ron brought in a new crew to finish the job. Jesse quit. So did a few others. I should have left too, but I needed the paycheck. The office building is finished now. People work there every day, walking over that spot without ever knowing what's underneath. I still think about it. What we buried, what we trapped. And sometimes, when I drive past at night, I park for a minute and roll down the window. I listen, and every now and then I swear I hear it. Knocking. I used to work as a night shift security guard at a construction site. It wasn't a bad job. Boring most nights, just walking around, making sure no one was trespassing. The company was building some office complex on an old warehouse lot. I was alone every night, but that didn't bother me. What bothered me was the foundation pit. It always felt wrong. It was just a deep hole in the dirt, maybe 20 feet down, with rebar and wooden framing set up for the next concrete pour. Nothing unusual, but at night when I did my rounds, I always had the sense that someone was standing down there. I chalked it up to paranoia, shadows, bad lighting, my mind playing tricks on me, until one night I realized it wasn't. It was around 2 a.m. when I saw him for the first time. I was making my way across the site when I stopped at the edge of the foundation pit, and there he was, a man, just standing at the bottom of the pit, staring up at me. I felt a jolt of fear. How the hell did he get in there? The site was locked down. I would have heard if someone climbed in. I shined my flashlight on him. He didn't move. He was wearing a dark jacket and jeans, normal clothes. But his face, I couldn't see it clearly. The shadows, the distance, something made it look wrong. "Hey," I called. "You're not supposed to be here." No reaction. "Do you need help?" Still nothing. I felt my stomach twist. Something wasn't right. I reached for my radio. This is site security. I've got a trespasser in the foundation pit." Silence, then static, then nothing. I looked back down. The pit was empty. I stared, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. The guy had been standing right there, but the dirt was undisturbed. No footprints. I scanned the whole pit with my flashlight. No one. I took a step back, heart pounding. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks in the dark. But deep down, I knew they weren't. I didn't tell anyone. What was I supposed to say? I saw a guy, but then he wasn't there? They'd think I was crazy. But the next night, I saw him again. Same time, 2 a.m. I did my rounds, avoiding the foundation pit as long as I could, but eventually, I had to check it. I walked up to the edge and my stomach dropped. He was there, closer this time, halfway up the pit. He wasn't climbing, he was just standing on the slope like the ground was holding him in place. Again, I shined my light on him. Again, he didn't move. But this time I could see his face, or rather I couldn't. It was blurred, like looking at a bad photo where the features don't quite come into focus. No eyes, no mouth, just smudged skin. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. Instead, I forced out a shaky breath. "Who are you?" The man tilted his head. Not much, just a fraction. Then he took a step toward me. I backed up so fast I nearly tripped. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold my flashlight. I didn't blink, I didn't look away, and when I turned to run, I heard footsteps behind me. I don't remember getting back to the security trailer. I just remember locking the door and sitting there, gripping my flashlight like a weapon. I didn't check the pit again that night. The next morning, I convinced myself it was exhaustion, stress, a trick of the dark. I told myself I wouldn't see him again. I was wrong. That night I went to the pit again, but this time he wasn't there. Instead, something else was. The concrete. The foundation pour had started early. The bottom of the pit was now a smooth gray slab. The framing and rebar were still in place, but the dirt floor was gone, and right in the middle of the wet concrete were footprints. One set, leading toward the edge of the pit, but not away. Like someone had walked up, but never left. I quit that night. Didn't even wait for my shift to end. I just left my keys in the trailer and walked off site. Never went back. A few weeks later, I checked the site out of curiosity. The foundation had set. The building was going up. No one ever mentioned finding anything strange, but sometimes I wonder if he's still down there. And if late at night when the office is quiet, if someone sitting at their desk ever hears footsteps coming from below. I've worked a lot of construction jobs, and every site has its fair share of weird stories. Workers disappearing for hours on end, tools vanishing, strange noises in unfinished buildings. Usually it's just guys messing around or forgetting where they left things. But last year I worked a job that still haunts me, because for the first time in my life I saw someone vanish, and no one else remembers him at all. It was a big office complex project on an old industrial lot. Middle of nowhere, surrounded by dirt roads and half-finished structures. Our crew was decent, mostly guys I'd worked with before, plus a few new hires. One of them was Eddie. At least that's what he said his name was. Eddie was quiet, kept to himself, showed up on time every day, did his work, never complained. At first I thought he was just shy, but the more I watched him, the more I realized something was off. For one thing, no one ever talked to him. Not in a mean way, just like he wasn't there. The foreman never called his name. The other workers never asked him for anything. Even when we were all eating lunch, no one sat near him. One day I decided to be friendly. "Hey man, you new to this kind of work?" Eddie turned to look at me. His expression was blank. Not annoyed, not confused, just empty. "I've worked here a while." His voice was flat, dull, like he wasn't used to talking. That threw me off. A while? I'd only seen him for about a week. "Oh, cool," I said. "What did you do before this?" He just stared at me. I laughed awkwardly. "Never mind, man. See you around." He didn't reply, just turned back to work. The more I paid attention, the weirder Eddie got. He never brought lunch. Never drank water, never checked his phone. He didn't even sweat in the heat. One day I caught him standing completely still on the edge of the foundation pit, just staring into it like he was waiting for something. And then there was his gear. Every guy on site had a hard hat, boots, gloves, standard safety equipment. Eddie had all of that, but his stuff always looked old, not dirty, just worn down in a way that didn't make sense, like he'd been using the same boots and helmet for years. Then came the final straw. One day I asked my foreman about Eddie. "Hey, what's Eddie's deal, the new guy?" The foreman frowned. "Who?" "Eddie. Quiet guy, works over by the rebar most days." He stared at me like I was crazy. "We don't have a guy named Eddie." I laughed. "Dude, he's right over there." I turned. He was gone. I felt sick. I knew I wasn't losing it. I'd seen Eddie every day for a week, but no one else seemed to remember him. So after my shift, I went to the crew locker area. Every worker had a space for their stuff. I found Eddie's spot. His boots were inside, his helmet, his gloves, but no name tag. And when I checked the crew list, his name wasn't there. That night I couldn't sleep. Something about Eddie was wrong. The next morning I came in early before anyone else. The site was quiet, the sky still dark, and that's when I saw him. Eddie, standing at the edge of the foundation pit, just staring down into it. A cold chill ran through me. What was he looking at? I called out, "Eddie." He didn't move. I walked closer. "Eddie, what the hell is going on, man?" He finally turned to look at me, and for the first time, he smiled. Not a normal smile, too wide, too forced, like he was trying to remember how. Then he stepped forward and fell. I ran to the edge and looked down. He was gone. No body, no dust, no impact, just an empty pit, like he had never been there at all. I lost my job that week. The foreman thought I was on something, babbling about a worker who didn't exist, freaking out over nothing. I tried to find records of him, checked the employee logs, the sign-in sheets, nothing. No Eddie. No one matching his description. But I know what I saw. And sometimes when I pass that office building we built, I wonder, did Eddie fall? Or did he go back to wherever he came from? And more importantly, was he ever supposed to leave? Most people don't realize how deep a building's foundation goes. They see the steel beams, the concrete, the glass, but they never think about what's underneath. They don't know about the layers of dirt and rock that have to be dug out, the pits that go dozens of feet down before a single wall is put up. And they sure as hell don't know what sometimes gets unearthed in the process. I didn't either, until last year, when we started digging the foundation for a new office complex. We were supposed to hit bedrock at 40 feet. Instead, we found a hole that didn't have a bottom, and before we could figure out what it was, it took one of us. We broke ground without any problems. The soil was soft at first, then turned rocky as we went deeper. The excavation crew was making great time until we hit the void. That's what we called it. One morning, the guys operating the auger drill hit something unexpected. Instead of striking rock or packed earth, the drill suddenly dropped, like it had punched through into an empty space. They pulled the auger up, but instead of chunks of debris, there was nothing. Just dirt on the upper half, like the lower part had been swallowed. It didn't make sense. According to the site survey, there weren't any old tunnels or basements here. But when we sent a flashlight down, it just kept falling. We never heard it hit the bottom. The foreman told us to stay away from the hole until we figured out what was down there. He called the engineers, but they wouldn't be on site until the next morning. That night, one of the workers, Miguel, stayed behind to lock up. He was the last one near the pit. The next morning, he was gone. His truck was still in the lot. His gear was still in the trailer. His phone was on the workbench. But Miguel himself vanished. The security cameras weren't much help. They caught him walking toward the hole around 11 p.m., and then the feed cut out for 3 minutes. When it came back, the hole was empty. No Miguel, no sound, no struggle. Like he had never been there. After Miguel disappeared, the engineers showed up. They lowered a probe with a depth gauge, trying to figure out how far the void went. The cable spooled out. 50 feet, 100 feet, 150. At 200 feet, we started hearing the noise. It was faint at first, a weird, distant scraping sound. At 300 feet, it changed. It wasn't scraping anymore. It was breathing. The engineers argued about what to do next. Some wanted to keep lowering the probe. Others said to fill the hole immediately. They never got the chance. That night, a storm rolled in, bringing heavy rain. The pit flooded within hours, turning into a black pool of muddy water. We tried pumping it out, but it just kept refilling, as if something underneath was pulling the water down. By the end of the week, the company ordered us to seal it. We poured tons of concrete into that hole, more than should have been necessary. It just kept sinking. By the time we finished, we had dumped enough concrete to fill a 10-story building. They built the office over it, right on top. I drive past sometimes, and I wonder, if you were to stand in the basement of that building, late at night with everything quiet, would you hear it? That slow, deep breathing from beneath the floor? And if you did, would it mean that Miguel is still down there? Or that he's not alone?